My name is Verena Holt. I am 68 years old, and this Thanksgiving was supposed to be the quiet one, the kind where people laugh over cranberry sauce and old stories. I had roasted the turkey myself, the way I always did, brushing it with rosemary and butter just before the guests arrived. The dining room smelled like home, but it no longer felt like mine. My daughter Marit sat across the table, her shoulders squared like someone waiting for applause. She looked beautiful in that distant metallic way, silver blouse, perfect hair, no trace of warmth. Her husband Grant poured more wine into his glass, watching her with the faint smile of a man who already knew the script. I tried to hold the evening together. I spoke about the weather, about the harbor lights beyond the windows, about how her father would have loved to see us all here again. But the air was too still. Conversation thinned like candle wax cooling on the tablecloth. Then Marit stood. Her chair scraped the floor loud enough to still the music. She lifted her glass and said clear as a bell, "From now on, I'm the owner of this house. Get out!" The laughter died. Forks hung midair. Someone coughed a sharp sound in the quiet. Grant's mouth twitched, half smirk, half triumph. Behind me, the portrait of my late husband seemed to watch the room with steady disapproval. I did not shout. I did not cry. I smiled the way you smile when something inside you has already broken and mended in secret. I drew a breath and whispered just loud enough for the nearest guests to hear, 3, 2, 1. Silence answered. Marit's eyes flickered unsure. I rose slowly, my hands steady on the back of my chair. I was waiting for you to say that I told her. My voice was calm, almost gentle. I had practiced those words in my head for weeks. Around us, the candles wavered in the draft. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, marking each second that the old life fell away. I turned toward the sideboard where a locked folder waited ready for what came next. The room held its breath as I left the table and walked into the quiet. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the letter arrived. I found it wedged among grocery flyers and church newsletters, the seal from the Charleston County Assessor's Office neat and official. I opened it at the kitchen counter, still wearing my gardening gloves, and read the heading, Notice of Ownership, Update, New Owner, Merritt L. Canwell. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, some clerical mix-up. I read the line again, then again. The words refused to change. The kettle clicked off behind me, a faint whistle I barely heard. My eyes burned as I reached for the drawer where I kept important papers. Inside was the durable power of attorney I'd signed for Marit 2 years ago, just in case of medical emergencies. She'd insisted it was only for safety. "It's what responsible families do, Mom," she'd said. Responsible families? I'd believed her. I laid the document beside the county letter. The signatures were the same, or close enough. Only the new one curved differently, as if someone had traced it through a screen. My name, my home stolen in digital ink. When the front door creaked, I froze. But it was only the wind through the porch lattice. My heart still pounded like footsteps. I poured the cold tea out and called Thompson and Gray, the law firm that had handled my husband's estate. A young receptionist answered. When I asked for Mr. Gray, her voice softened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Holt. He retired last spring. Would you like me to refer you to someone?" Her keyboard clattered for a moment. "Udine March," she said finally. She worked with Mr. Gray before he left. Very discreet. Discreet. That was what I needed. I wrote the name on the envelope itself, my hand trembling. "Can you tell her it's about property transfer fraud?" I asked. "I'll have her call you today." By the time the sun dipped low over the harbor, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, husky, older. "Verena Holt. This is Udine March. I think you'd better bring whatever you have. Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp." The line went silent, and so did I. The kettle clicked again, though I hadn't turned it on. Udine March's office sat above a narrow row of insurance agencies downtown, the kind of place where time moved quietly. She stood, When I entered, a tall woman with silver hair, cut blunt at the jaw, her glasses hanging from a blue cord. "You brought the letter?" she asked. I handed it to her, along with the printed emails and copies I'd made the night before. My voice felt smaller than usual. "They say my daughter owns my house. I never signed anything." Udine spread the pages on her desk, scanning with the calm of someone who'd seen too many betrayals dressed in paperwork. "I see the problem," she murmured. "Your daughter used a quitclaim deed, likely filed through an online notary system. These e-notaries are fast, but careless. If she had your old power of attorney, she could upload it as justification." "She did," I said. "I gave it to her 2 years ago when I had that heart scare. It was supposed to be for emergencies only." Udine nodded once. "That was your first kindness and her first weapon. But don't lose sleep. Every signature leaves a fingerprint." She opened a legal pad. "We'll need 3 things: certified property records, the e-notary verification log, and the IP timestamps of who submitted the form. If she filed it herself, it will trace back to her device." Her confidence steadied me. I took notes as she spoke, the pen digging grooves into the paper. Udine looked up. "You can either confront her now or prepare." "I'd prepare." "I've already decided," I said. "No shouting, just proof." She smiled faintly. "Good. Proof doesn't tremble." I left the office with a thin folder pressed to my chest. The air outside smelled of low tide and winter salt. By the time I reached home, I'd cleared a space on the dining table and began assembling what I had: the county letter, the power of attorney, copy the forgery side by side. I slipped each page into a binder and wrote on the cover in steady ink, "Thanksgiving folder." Late that night, I walked the hallway, fingertips brushing the wooden frames my husband had built. The boards creaked beneath my feet, alive with memory. I stopped beneath his portrait and whispered, "I'm not letting her take what you built." The first time Marit arrived without calling, I was pruning the azaleas. Her car door slammed, and a moment later, she appeared with 2 strangers holding clipboards. "Don't mind us, Mom," she said lightly. "We're just checking on things." One of the men started measuring the porch windows. The other ran his hand along the banister rail my husband had carved 40 years ago, checking for what I asked. Marit smiled too bright. "Future improvements. Grant thinks the house could use modernization. Maybe open up the kitchen, remove that old paneling." "That paneling is cedar," I said. "It's older than you." Grant appeared from behind her sleeves rolled charm rehearsed. "It's all about property tax optimization, Mrs. Holt. A few renovations could raise the appraisal." "Let us leverage us," I interrupted. He cleared his throat. "I mean your family." Marit shot him a look. "Grant, go measure the back windows." When he left, her smile dropped. "You really should let me handle this, Mom. Paperwork is complicated at your age." I steadied my hands on the shears. "So is gratitude." For a second she hesitated, then walked inside without asking. I heard her heels clicking through the hall, the same rhythm from when she was 16 and angry about curfews. That night, I called my cousin Miriam. She'd always been blunt in ways I could never manage. After I finished describing the scene, she exhaled sharply. "Verena. She's rehearsing ownership, not helping. Don't give her the satisfaction of a fight. Let her talk until she exposes herself." Her words echoed what Udine had said the day before: patience, then precision. Over the next week, Marit sent texts about new contractors and insurance quotes. I saved every one. I wrote the dates in my binder, noting who she brought, what she measured, the tone she used when she said, "We'll fix it." Each entry steadied me. Every word she spoke became another piece of proof. Udine's last message blinked on my phone that evening. Let her speak first in public. Words weigh heavier with witnesses. I wrote back a single line, "Understood." The morning of Thanksgiving began with the smell of roasted turkey and polished silver. I had been up since dawn, basting and wiping and pretending this year would be no different from the others. The air outside was cool enough to bite, and I let it in through the kitchen window just to steady myself. By noon, the table was set pecan pie, cooling cranberry relish gleaming in a crystal bowl. My husband's old jazz records played low in the background, his voice from another life murmuring through the speakers. "You always make too much, Verena," Marit called as I was arranging the napkins. "We'll bring the wine," she said, her tone rehearsed and brittle. "Something special for the new homeowner." I let the words hang, then answered softly, "That's generous." When she arrived, her heels clicked across the porch as if she were crossing a stage. Grant followed, carrying 2 bottles wrapped in gold foil. "Imported," he said, placing them on the counter. "Worth nearly 300. "Then let's not spill any," I replied. I watched them drift through the house like guests touring an estate. Mari touched the framed photos, straightened them, as if claiming the walls themselves. My Thanksgiving folder lay hidden beneath the sideboard, ready sealed in a leather case. By late afternoon, cousins and neighbors began arriving, voices, bright laughter forced. My cousin Miriam hugged me tight. "You look calm," she whispered. "I am calm," I said, though the calm felt like glass stretched thin. At 6, the candles were lit. The room glowed amber, gentle, and deceptive. Marit took the seat at the head of the table beside Grant, leaving me to sit halfway down like a guest in my own home. No one mentioned it. The plates clinked, the gravy steamed, the old playlist looped softly through the background. I listened to their chatter about business and renovations and markets, their voices overlapping like static. Each word was a thread in the trap she'd spun, and I let her pull it tighter. As dessert cooled in the kitchen, I counted under my breath, minute by minute, breath by breath, until the truth would have no place left to hide. Dessert was nearly served when Marit lifted her glass and tapped it against her fork. The sharp ring cut through the chatter like a crack in glass. "Before we eat pie," she said, her voice too bright, "I have an announcement." Every head turned. Grant leaned back in his chair, his smile small and knowing. "I've spoken with a lawyer," Marit continued. "As of this week, the deed has been processed. From now on, I'm the owner of this house." The room stilled. Forks froze midair. Someone dropped a spoon, and it clattered against the china. "I'll make sure the place is well cared for," she went on. "Mother's done her part. It's time for a new generation to manage things properly." I watched her calm as the surface of the water before a storm. My hands rested on the tablecloth, palms open. The candlelight shimmered across her ring, catching the smug curve of her smile. Cousin Miriam's whisper barely reached me. "Don't you dare let her." I breathed in slowly and pushed my chair back. "Congratulations, Marit," I said softly. "In that case, you'll be handling the property taxes, due Monday, $11,200. The room murmured. Heads turned. Grant blinked. What Marit said, her confidence faltering. "Property taxes?" I repeated, my tone even. "Any rightful owner would know that's their first duty." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The guests shifted, uncertain where to look. Grant cleared his throat and reached for his wine. We'll sort that out later," she stammered. "No need," I said. "The county will be expecting payment first thing Monday morning. I imagine they'll be pleased to know who to contact." The silence deepened thick and electric. Even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Marit's color drained. She looked smaller somehow, her grandeur dissolving under the weight of her own claim. I stood steady as a tide. "If you'll excuse me," I said. "Enjoy the dessert." Then I turned, walked to the sideboard, and opened the drawer where my folder rested. My fingers brushed the leather spine, the quiet promise I'd kept to myself. Behind me, the table stayed silent. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow, deliberate click of the drawer closing. The morning after Thanksgiving, Charleston was washed clean by a cold drizzle. I met Udine outside a narrow brick building on Broad Street. She held her umbrella low and said, "You brought everything." I lifted the leather binder from my bag. Every document, every screenshot, every text. Inside the office smelled faintly of coffee and paper dust. The title attorney, a calm man named Louis Shaw, greeted us with a nod. He studied the files as Udine summarized durable power of attorney, misused forged quitclaim, deed filed through an online notary, and digital signature inconsistencies. Shaw adjusted his glasses. "We'll initiate a quiet title action and a fraud complaint. I'll also record a lis pendens today. She won't be able to sell or mortgage the property while this proceeds." I watched the pen move across the page, steady and deliberate. The sound of it felt like oxygen after a long dive. Udine turned to me. "Once this is filed, she'll know. Be ready for the call." It came before sunset. My phone buzzed on the counter. Merritt's name flashed across the screen. I answered. "So this is how you thank your daughter," she said, dragging family into court. Her tone was sharp, but underneath, it was fear. "You dragged yourself," I replied. "I'm only putting things back where they belong. You'll regret this, Mother." "I already did," I said quietly, and hung up. For a long time, I stood by the window listening to the rain tick against the glass. Then I walked to the porch, turned on the old lamp, and sat beneath its glow. The brass base still bore the faint fingerprints of my husband from the day he'd installed it. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy, thick, with what couldn't be undone. I didn't feel victory, only a kind of stillness, like something vast had shifted, and I was finally standing where I should have been all along. Inside, on the kitchen table, the binder lay open to the first page. At the top in my own hand, I had written a single line: "Truth does not tremble." The Charleston County Courthouse smelled faintly of polish and rain. My shoes echoed across the marble as I followed Udine into the hearing room. She moved with purpose, her briefcase tucked neatly under her arm. Across the aisle, Merritt sat beside Grant, both pale beneath the fluorescent lights. She wouldn't look at me. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried quiet authority, opened the session. Case number 4821, Holt versus Canwell. Quiet title and fraud complaint. Udine rose first. "Your Honor," she said, her tone steady. "This case involves an unlawful transfer of real property executed under a forged power of attorney. We will demonstrate that Mrs. Holt's signature was falsified and that her daughter, the defendant, knowingly misused her access." The judge gestured for her to proceed. Udine called the technical witness from the notary platform, a soft-spoken man who explained timestamps, IP addresses, and the process of digital verification. Each sentence landed like a nail hammered into wood. When the judge asked for visual evidence, the clerk played the e-notary footage. The screen flickered, and there she was, Merritt Younger confident, holding up her phone camera. "Attorney-in-fact for Verena Holt," she said, in the recording, forging my name with a stylus. The silence that followed was unbearable. Merritt shifted in her chair, her face draining of color. Grant whispered something, but she shook her head. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Canwell, is that you in the video?" Her voice cracked. It was a misunderstanding." Udine didn't speak. She simply slid the next exhibit across the table, the property logs, the digital certificate, the IP address, traced to Merritt's home. The judge's pen tapped twice. "Enough. The evidence is clear." Grant buried his face in his hands. Merritt began to cry softly, not for remorse, but for exposure. When my turn came, I stood. "I did not come here to punish my daughter," I said quietly. "Only to protect what my husband and I built. That house is my home, not a prize." The judge nodded, once her tone firm. "The deed is hereby void. Full ownership reverts to Mrs. Holt. A separate inquiry into fraud will proceed. The gavel struck. The sound was final clean, like glass shattering and sunlight pouring through the break. I gathered my folder and walked out without turning back. Outside, the air smelled of salt and morning. The courthouse doors closed behind me, and for the first time in months, the weight in my chest began to lift. 3 weeks after the ruling, I rewired the porch lamp myself. The screws were small and stubborn, and my hands trembled once or twice, but I managed. When the bulb flickered to life, I fastened the new brass tag beneath, polished until the letters caught the afternoon sun. Built by boundaries. Kept by respect. The words weren't for anyone else. They were for me, and maybe for the ghosts who still lingered in the quiet corners of this house. That Monday, I began volunteering at the Charleston Maritime Museum. They needed someone to help catalog historic donations and teach school groups about preservation ethics. I talked about ships' trade routes and the way salt air eats through metal if you forget to care for it. One of the students asked if I missed being home during the day. Not at all, I said. Some things are meant to be tended, not guarded. The house waited for me each evening, calmer now, like an old friend that had survived a long illness. I had the locks changed, the files stored, and the binder labeled Thanksgiving folder, placed neatly on the study shelf. The letter came near dusk, a plain white envelope with my name written in Merritt's precise angular hand. It had no return address. The note inside was short, defensive, and unsigned. She wrote that she never meant it to go so far, that she had only wanted to help, and that maybe someday we could talk. I read it once, folded it carefully, and slid it behind the binder marked closed. The paper made a soft sound as it settled like an exhale. Later, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the street lamps bloom along the block. The brass tag above me glowed faintly under the new bulb. I whispered, "Some inherit houses. Others inherit courage." The light hummed steady in reply, and for the first time in months, the air around me felt entirely my own.